in collaboration with the Cyprus Mail. This is the Cyprus News Digest with Rosie Haralambous.
This week we meet a Palestinian refugee who discusses gender, identity and worth, and a book about his life.
Zionism is one thing and Judaism is something else. There are Palestinian Jews, there are Lebanese Jews, there are Iraqi Jews, there are Arab Jews. Zionism is an ideology, it is not a religion, so they're separated.
And have you got what it takes to enter the Space Apps Challenge?
Try new technologies that will be adapted to help us adapt here on Earth in our everyday lives.
We talked a few weeks ago about a new book that was launched in Cyprus recently called Are You This or Are You This? And I'm really pleased to welcome to the programme this week the gentleman it's all about. He is Madian Al-Jazera, and he joins us now. Madian, it's a very controversial book, I suppose, for some people. I read it and I couldn't put it down, actually. I found it absolutely fascinating. But tell us what it's about if you want somebody who doesn't know about it to think, maybe I should go and get that book.
Well, thank you for this, Rosie. Yes, it is. The book is controversial. If I were to say what it's really about, it's about identity, it's about worth, it's about value, and it's about how people underestimate and treat people when they think of them as being less value. And this comes, and there's the identity part, there's the displacement part. It's about being a refugee and going through hardships with all of this, but yet having that very strong tribal love within the family that enabled me to keep it together through all of these issues and stories and hardships.
Now, we should say that you are an Arab and you have lived in various places in the Middle East and indeed in America, but you're gay. So tell me a little bit about dealing with that in those different places.
It takes a while before someone realizes they're gay. And then there's a coming out process. This is universal. This is everywhere. But then for me, as an Arab, as a Palestinian, as a displaced person, there were just too many variables to deal with. Because the culture is different in so many different places that I did grow up and live in. In the US, it wasn't a problem. This is where I came out, was in the US. Going to British schools, growing up, I was too young then. I couldn't. There were templates being thrown at me on how I should live and how I should be a little boy. Just like culturally at home, there's a template, and this template is, you're the boy, and you're going to find the girl, and you're going to love them, and you look at your parents, you see that love going on between the two, and you think, okay, this is what I'm going to look and thrive to become, and then there'll be the marriage and the children and everything. There was no template whatsoever that talked about how it is if I were actually to like another boy, a person would completely put that to the side and try to overcome it and just think that maybe it's a phase, maybe down the line things will change. When I grow up, everything will just change.
When did you first realise that you were probably gay?
Well, the term gay wasn't around.
No.
So when you don't have vocabulary, you can't pin it. But I do remember having feelings, not sexual, but I had an affinity for my other male friends. I had affinities to my girlfriends, but they were different, and I'd sit and imagine, being, when you start creating little stories in your head and you act them out and you play them out. The hero was always a man. There was my hero, and that hero was always a man. Or if I was the hero to someone, I was a hero to another man or another boy. And this is with all sex taken out of it, no sexuality there whatsoever. It's just a feeling and an affinity. So I guess I knew it looking back. I've always known it, but there was no vocabulary for it. Definitely not as a child, no vocabulary. But even growing up, I think I only heard the word gay when I was about 25 or 26. And then I had the chance to start thinking, okay, there's something called homosexual, there's something called gay. Am I that? And it was scary. I didn't want to be that because I knew all the odds were against. Even in America, the odds were against at that time. I'm 56, so this is a long time ago.
Yeah, it wasn't accepted.
It wasn't
is now.
accepted. Yeah, now it is. Now it's a completely different story. And maybe now, this is why I come out with the book now. I feel a lot more comfortable. But I also, this is what I tell a lot of my gay friends, the younger ones, especially now. We had dinner yesterday and I was telling a friend, don't come out until you're solid on your feet. But you know what? This tune is very similar to the Palestinian tune. Your education is your weapon in life. Your success is your weapon in life. You have nowhere to go, but your success will hold you up. And now it's the same. This is my advice to my younger gay fellow men, or even lesbian fellow girlfriends, or anyone, just to be proper and correct, anyone within the LGBTIQ spectrum, that our weapon in life is success. Don't come out to your families until you're on both feet, you're independent, and you can stand solid on your own. Because we don't come out because we worry about being displaced through rejection. So if we're okay financially, if we've got that power, we can say what we want to say, and we can be ourselves, and the truth will come out.
And you have been very successful in your business enterprises in Jordan, haven't you? I mean, tell us a little bit about how that all came about, and the cafe bookshop, the internet, and so on, because that also was well before its time.
It was. And yes, I have achieved that success in Jordan. I think I could have achieved much more success. I've been knocked down so many times just for being a gay man. So even the success of my cafe, Bookset Cafe, could have gone much, much farther. But there was always that one person who came in between deals and had to whisper the fact that I was a gay man and that this was not acceptable and this was against traditions and value, and that this project would never work, whether it was in Dubai or Ajman or Bahrain. And this is where I've been multiple times, where the invitation would come out and then it would get knocked down just because I was a gay man.
I found that part of the book very difficult to comprehend, and because unless I've got it wrong, I thought that across the Middle East, relationships between men, and particularly men and boys, were widespread, and yet they're illegal in many of those countries, not so, I believe, in Jordan. So it's a bit of a double standard, isn't it?
Well, like many things in the Middle East or the rest of the world. Yes. For instance, in Kuwait, when people went pearl diving, that was part of the industry. They would go pearl diving. They'd go out for a month or two in their boats, the booms, they used to call them, the wooden boats. They used to take in 2 or 3 young men who they knew were effeminate in the back of the head. Again, there was no terminology, no vocabulary, but they knew that these people were somewhat gay. And these younger ones were used for sex. But then even down the line, even when I was born in Kuwait, when I was living in Kuwait, still as a child, I would always hear the stories of that, yeah, he has a boy. So it was normal. It was there. And when I hear stories about my mom and my dad of their settings in Palestine, homosexuality was around. Even transgender men and women were around. Again, these terms were not used. They were around, and it was never an issue. But, actually, by law, the law that came in and criminalized homosexuality was British law and French law under colonialism. And this is where that went against the culture.
Colonialism. We have to talk about that since you're Palestinian. We're talking about the Middle East. I'd like to move on to your thoughts about what is happening in Palestine. You, I know, through your bookshop in Amman, I believe you even employed Israeli people, which shows an acceptance of certain things, or perhaps I should say an acceptance that people are people, but that doesn't stop you from feeling, I presume, very angry and upset about the politics of what's happening in the Middle East.
It's a very loaded question. Before I say anything, there is the politics of a country and there's the people of the country. So when I say colonialism and I say Britain, I am not talking about the people. I'm talking about the politics. When I say American US policies, I'm talking about the US policies. I'm not talking about the American people. So I really want to differentiate that before I start.
That's why
anything.
I put the question that way, because there is a huge difference between condemning a people and condemning the politics of their government.
Exactly. You can't use this broad brush. You just cannot. Facts are facts without getting too political. I am a Palestinian. I have the whole history, inherited history. My parents, my grandparents, the whole family line of Palestinians from Palestine. And this Sykes-Picot Agreement and the Balfour Declaration gave that away. So
where does
one
that
day
leave you?
It leaves me. I'm still a Palestinian. I hold on to it. I've inherited this part from my parents. You know, don't forget, you are a Palestinian. I have the accent, although sometimes it's mixed because I've lived in so many places. But I speak like a Palestinian. I think like a Palestinian. I eat like a Palestinian. I am a Palestinian, and I've taken all of that from the family and from fellow Palestinians. There's a whole culture. There's a whole set of dishes. You know, falafel is ours, hummus is ours. What is now Israeli couscous is Palestinian maftool. Everything's been taken and labelled as something else. So a fact is a fact. This is all ours. It was.
And I think that comes out very clearly in the book. I mean, it's very clear that you do have, well, as you said, you are a Palestinian, but you do have this total life, if you like, feeling that that's the basis. But you can't go there.
No, I can't, because we are occupied. It's very, very simple. I cannot go. My father wanted to be buried in Palestine. We couldn't get him into Palestine. He ended up being buried in Jordan. And I have a feeling my mom, may God give her long life, she's going to end up being buried in Jordan because they will not let her body go through, even though she has residency there. Things are just getting tougher and tougher. Big, tall walls are being built and people are unable to move from one place to another. So basic burial rights are not even there, let alone living rights, let alone personal rights or anything of that sort. Yes, I did hire an Israeli student. I didn't know it was an Israeli student then. And that was a very big test for me because Books at Cafe was a place that we took in refugees from everywhere. And we made it a point that we would not differentiate, we would not discriminate between religions. And God knows the whole area's got, there's like a million lines as borders, thin lines and wide lines, religion, sects of religion, origins, and all these wars are coming up over that. So we made it a point that we would not be discriminating. So when we found out that we had hired this his name is Itai, I thought it was a Dutch name because his mum is Dutch also. And it turned out no, he was Israeli. And I sat back in shock. And then me and my brother, Mazhar, just talked about it and said, we can't play double standards here. If we're going to say we're open to everybody, then we're going to be open to everybody. And this person is at our doorstep. Now, we weren't tested too much because he only came in for 2 shifts. He was a high school kid and left. But I remained really good friends with his mum and his dad. His dad became the ambassador at that time. And it becomes a struggle because I am Palestinian. I am displaced by Zionism. Again, this is a very important point. I have to keep saying that. Zionism is one thing and Judaism is something else. There are Palestinian Jews. There are Lebanese Jews. There are Iraqi Jews. There are Arab Jews. Zionism is an ideology. It is not a religion. So they're separated. I am not, when I rebel against occupation, I am rebelling against Zionism. It's a Zionist occupation that only allows Jews to be part of their country, Israel. So even Israel itself, if you're a Christian and you're not a full Jew, you're not a full Israeli. So there's a bit of discrimination and apartheid going on
Just
there.
a bit.
Just a bit. And when you make friends with people and you love people who happen to be from that country, it becomes a struggle, because as a human I have love for them. But then I love you as a human. And this is a debate I'm having with a really good friend of mine called Russell out of Tel Aviv. We really I know he would kill for me. I know I would kill for him. He's Israeli. He's Israeli from New York, so he wasn't born in Palestine or Israel or Tel Aviv. But he follows the system of Israel. The system of Israel is a Zionist system. It's an apartheid system. It's a system that oppresses me as a Palestinian, his best friend. How do we deal with this?
It's very difficult.
It's very difficult.
I want to ask you, I've got to ask you, I nearly laughed out loud at the bit in the book about the carrots and the islands. So do please enlighten people who are listening to this as to what I'm talking about.
When I talk about displacement, it isn't just a physical displacement, it's an emotional displacement, it's your last name displacement. I was born, and on my passport, I remember my first report card from school. It said Madian Jazara. So Jazara meaning carrot. But then 1 year later, and I knew in that process, my dad and the uncles, their Jordanian passports had expired and we were living in Kuwait. They sent them to Jordan to be renewed, and 4 months later they came back. And this is when, there was no computers. People were writing things by hand. So these 3 passports come back, and there's the Jazara, the carrot, was given to one of my uncles on his passport. We became Jaziras, the island, and then a third uncle was a Jazar, the butcher. So these few little spelling mistakes separated and displaced the 3 of us on paper. We grew up being Jaziras, and actually I'm glad it was Jazira, because I didn't want to be a carrot. An island was good, but a carrot wasn't, and the butcher was kind of still a bit iffy. But we grew up with that, and nobody fought it, and nobody questioned. And it's only after my dad died, and slightly before, that, and as I grew up and we grew up, we started to ask the questions: who are we? What are we? Which one are we? Are we the carrots? Are we the butchers? Or are we the islands? And the old folk have been traumatized so badly from one particular battle in Jenin, where they've lost everything, and literally from riches to rags, severely traumatized, that the kids and a lot of people died. The elderly mostly died. The younger ones were left to take over the businesses and the whole livelihood of the rest of the family, and they had no time to think of their history and their past and what had happened. They only had time to plan the next meal for everybody else, and they just got used to it. So by the time they came down to us, nobody could remember any of the stories. So I started to target condolence houses, which is basically when somebody dies from Jenin, from our particular town, and the families come to pay, their respect in the house that goes on for 3 days. I would go, me and my brothers, we'd target the older folk, whoever's left that's old. Are you from Jenin? Are you from Jenin? And we'd start asking questions, only to find out now, and we're still in the process of trying to confirm, that we are Jazars in origin and not Jazira. We're from the butchers, we're not the carrots, and we're not the island.
The one thing that always strikes me when I think about the Palestinian question is Sumud.
Oh.
And the fact that despite everything that has happened over so many years, there is still a resilience there. How do you explain that?
When you said Sumud, I wanted to say resilience, but you got to it before me. We are resilient. And I think that's when you literally, your back is to a wall. That's it. You face everything that comes at us. We can't turn around and run anywhere. There's nowhere to run. There's no country to run to. There's no government to run to. There's no system to run to defend you as a Palestinian. So we've been raised from childhood to fight. We fight. We stand. We face everything head on. Because there's nothing else to go to.
And has that philosophy helped you in the other issues that we've talked about dealing with in your life?
Absolutely, absolutely. And hence this book. I'm facing it head on. It took a while. I've always wanted to do it, but I had to calculate it. Because, when a person comes out, you can't think of yourself only. You've got to think of everybody else around you. And I've gotten to the point where now that I realise that, I've worked it up slowly, came out to the family slowly. But then at 56, I can't die without my truth. It's my truth. I can't. It's a very big part of me that has to come out.
Well, it's certainly come out in this book. Are You This or Are You This is the title. You can look out for it in all good bookshops, and I'm sure it's available online. It's actually written by Ellen Iorghiu, who had long conversations with Madian, who we've just been talking to, and put it all down into what is, I tell you, a fascinating story. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Keep up to date with events in Cyprus and around the world with the Cyprus News Digest.
The Cyprus Space Exploration Organisation is once again running a Space Apps Challenge. What's it all about? I remember talking a couple of years ago to George Thanos, who is president of the CSEO, and he joins us now, along with their head of education and project manager, Colm Larkin. George, if you'll just, for people who aren't aware of what the Space Exploration Organisation does, just give us a quick overview, if you will, before we start talking about the Apps Challenge.
Yes, the Cyprus Space Exploration Organization is a space research institution based in Cyprus with quite a lot of space research projects ongoing at the moment involving young people in entrepreneurship and innovation, hence the competition. But at the same time, we're very much involved in international relations. And recently, back in 2018, Cyprus became the permanent base of the Mars Upper Atmosphere Network, where scientists from around the world, from NASA, Europe, Russia, China, etc., are all collaborating between them to analyze the data from the Martian atmosphere in order to understand how Mars is losing its atmosphere and if a similar problem is possible to be happening on Earth, and how can we reverse or stop such a possible problem, especially these days that we're going with the climate change. This is a very current topic, and therefore this research is being coordinated from Nicosia, from the Cyprus Space Exploration Organization.
And I think I'm right in saying, am I, George, that you had a team here not so very long ago, was it at the end of last year, looking at the geology and so on up in the Troodos Mountains, which they think is fairly similar to some of that on Mars?
That's true as well, yes. Basically what we're doing is we're also coordinating a project. These scientists that you mentioned are going to be in Nicosia next October, and that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to take the instrumentation, we're going to integrate it here in Cyprus. Imagine scientists working together to create this piece of instrument that is going to go to Mars, and then going up onto the mountains in specific locations that are very similar to the red planet. Of course, we know that many areas of Cyprus have got this red soil, which is rich in iron oxide. So similar happens on Rhodos. So we're going to find a location which is ideal, and we're going to test the mechanism before this is verified to be working optimally, and then being sent on to a long mission to Mars.
Now, if I come over to Colm, you're coordinating this year's Space Apps Challenge. What do you have to bear in mind, and what exactly do you mean by space apps?
Well, space apps is really about the applications of space research and exploration, and that application can be in several forms. Research and innovation for startups, from businesses, to education, how we use space to teach subjects within schools, not necessarily just about space, but how we would use space in our research to teach subjects. It also comes in the form of art as well, that we can help artists to express complex subjects of space and research through the form of art. One of the challenges this year is actually an origami challenge in Space Apps. So it's really kind of trying to apply as much of space and every aspect of space to everyday lives, and how it's, can show to enrich everybody's life here on Earth, not just sending rockets into space.
Yeah, and not just sending, it's been much in the news, hasn't it, passengers into space recently. And you see a lot of people saying, what a waste of money. But I don't think an awful lot of people understand the knowledge that can be gained from space exploration that can benefit us here on Earth.
There was one mission that was indeed a private mission, but it was actually carried out by a children's hospital in the United States that carried out research on the actual passengers to see what high-speed travel and the changes in the gravitational pull as we're flying into space, and many, many other forms of research into what happens to the body and how maybe that might help us with treating certain conditions, or how the stresses can cause it. And that was not really talked about. Everyone seemed to talk about Jeff Bezos more than the couple of missions that actually did carry out a lot of research and brought a lot of research back to Earth that will help people's lives in the future. And that is kind of unfortunate. The sensational aspects really did overwhelm the missions that actually did carry out good scientific research and try new technologies that will be adapted to help us down here on Earth in our everyday lives.
So let's come to this year's Space Apps Challenge. It's aimed, if I remember rightly, at mostly younger people. What are you hoping they will do, and how do they get involved?
Well, it's pretty easy to get involved. All they really need to do is register at the Space Apps Challenge website. They can just Google Space Apps 2021 and they'll find it. It's a website that's maintained by NASA. So you register there and you're good to go to join in the competition. The competition this year is virtual. So once you register, the organization can contact you and we can send you all the details of what you would need to know to take part. So the virtual events that we're going to have over the weekend, where you can kind of come in, you can meet, you can connect with people, you can discuss the challenges or different aspects of space with.
In the past, I think these people who've entered have come up with ideas that can be put into practice, as it were. But you talk about a weekend. I presume they have to have the relevant weekend absolutely free. So tell us a bit about the time constraints before people sign up and then find that, oops, they're not going to be around a computer on that weekend.
It starts on Saturday, the 2nd of October, and it finishes on Sunday evening, the 3rd of October. And the constraints is pretty much the idea of these competitions is you work through the 24 hours to pretty much prepare your proposal for your solution to any of the challenges. There's about 20 challenges they can choose from, so they can read through them before the competition starts. And then when we kick off the competition, they work through the night on their projects. So by Sunday, they're able to present their idea, and anybody that wins the Cyprus stage of the competition will be put forward to the international stage, and they would have an extra month or so to prepare and refine their proposals.
So all the people who enter from Cyprus, do they end up working as a team, or are they working in smaller groups or even singly?
The idea of the competition is for teamwork. So in a normal year, when it would be a physical competition, you would just have to appear on the day and you would form a team and you would meet people and connect with people that might be able to help you with your idea, or you could help them with their ideas. Unfortunately, because of COVID, Space Apps is again a virtual competition this year. So it makes it more difficult to entice people to connect and meet and develop these solutions, because although it's not as bad as last year I think everyone had to work in their own homes individually, but now people can meet up and teams can form, but they have to present their work virtually to us.
Okay, it's still pretty much of a challenge, I suppose, however well informed our youngsters are these days with communicating online. It's not the same as being in person, but we'll send people to the either Facebook page or the website of the Cyprus Space Exploration Organisation and hope that your entrants this year do as well as I know they have done in the past. Thank you for telling us about it, Colm Larkin, Head of Education, and George Thanos, President of the Cyprus Space Organisation. Well, that about wraps up this edition of the Cyprus News Digest. Many thanks for your company. Hope you'll join me next week. Till we meet again, take care and God bless. Bye-bye now.